Hey, welcome back to our special Politics by Faith, the collapse of the nuclear family. I want to go to Tim Carney, father of 6, author of the book Family Unfriendly, How Our Culture Has Made Raising Kids Much Harder Than It Needs to Be. Tim, good to talk to you, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It feels like to everyone who's an adult now that raising kids and being a kid is different today than it was back in the day. But how much of that is that true, or are we just romanticizing when I used to wander around all day in town and come back when the streetlights came on? Like, is that a real thing that happened, or I just making that up?
It is a real
romanticizing
thing.
The past.
It's absolutely a real thing that parenting inputs have changed. And what's up for debate is how much of that is because the broader culture or communities have changed, and how much of that is just about attitudes. And it's both, frankly, that people in Generation X, my generation and older, had more freedom as children. We wandered more. We did less supervised activities. We did more pickup sports than kids do today, and we did less organized sports than kids do today. And in fact, psychiatrists are starting to see that this has a bad mental health effect on children and adolescents today, that they don't have unsupervised play. And so it's bad for kids. But then, as you're saying, parents have it harder too, because there's just a demand to constantly have the kids. You got to drive them here, drive them there, supervise them there, sit on the side of practice. That those parental inputs, time-wise, energy-wise, money-wise, really are higher today than they were a generation ago.
My son is playing baseball now, so there's this talk of travel ball. It's like, oh, are you kidding me? Oh, I meant to tell you this. Last time we talked, so I was coaching my son's soccer team, and they were 6 at the time, so they're not good. But it was in an official league. But it was the last practice of the year, one of the last practices, and before practice started, all the boys were there, and they just started playing like the game, like straight up, like they picked teams, they split up. They started properly, and they do it. And I didn't say a word the entire practice. I just let them play soccer, and they were figuring out who the ball was out on and who goes next. They took water breaks. They did the whole thing themselves, and I thought Tim Carney would be very happy with that.
That's great. I mean, making ourselves irrelevant and redundant in children's lives should be a big part of our goal as parents, coaches, et cetera.
Yeah, I just let them do, we simulated pickup ball, which is something they don't ever get to do anymore.
And
I guess we can do twofold.
Really
go ahead.
It really is a big part of it, is the lack of unsupervised play. And one of the reasons I say some of it is just the individual parents' decision-making and values, but some of it is a broader culture. If there aren't kids playing pickup basketball at the basketball court, you can't just tell your kid to go down to the basketball court and play pickup basketball, unless you do what I do and you have a whole basketball team worth of children. But if you're going to just send your boy down to ride around the neighborhood and wander the neighborhood, that is made harder by the fact that other parents aren't doing it. So this is a situation where even parents who want to be more free range find that the culture is less welcoming of that.
Okay, so I've been fascinated by your analysis on how we even build towns anymore, and just the structural hurdles to community. What are those?
So the built environment. I mean, so when I was writing Family Unfriendly, I did not expect I would end up talking about walkability and bike paths. Because living in D.C. or New York, the people talking about walkability, I thought it was a bunch of, liberals who just hated cars or something. And then I slowly realized, wait a second, when you have children who cannot drive because they're 12 years old, and they need to get somewhere, and you have to drive them there, well, that interferes with their own independence, and it infringes on your time. And then as you're saying, community in general, when you're walking around the neighborhood and you bump into your friends, or your kids are walking around the neighborhood and they unplanned bump into their friends, when you can shop walking distance from your house, that actually tightens communities. So a more car-dependent community, which a lot of places are rural America is naturally going to be more car dependent, that's fine. But when suburbs and cities are made more dependent on cars, there's just less community cohesion and a lot less fun for kids. So this is about sidewalks. This is about speed limits. This is about crosswalks. This is about building playgrounds and basketball courts more frequently scattered around the town. And all of that is, you think it just is chance or happens to be nice, but it really does affect community cohesion and I think childhood independence.
Yeah, I'm so glad you started off with your initial impression on walkability, because I think conservatives need to take that back from being like this weird, wacky, progressive environmental thing. It's not. It's about family. It's a pro-family
Yeah,
thing.
especially
Having
kid
parks down the
walkability.
street that we can all play.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
walkability isn't just about your ability to walk to your hipster coffee shop. It's about your kid's ability to ride his bike to play pickup basketball.
Okay, so how do we change this? How do we get our culture back to or away from travel ball and back to stickball?
Yeah. So it's going to be at the local level. And one of the things I do in the book is I look at these family-friendly subcultures that are scattered around our broader family-unfriendly culture. And so a lot of it, my own life with a bunch of big Irish Catholic families now within walking distance of my house. We just moved and we picked the neighborhood precisely because we knew there were families there that valued this. These were religious families, big families, lots of kids wandering the neighborhood. And we build institutions. I start the book by talking about at my own parish setting up a T-ball program, which was basically just an excuse to have big family picnics every Friday night, where the parents could ignore the kids, have what I call a semi-legal beer. We never knew if it was actually okay for us to be drinking on the back campus of St. Andrew Apostle, and that involved institutions belonging to things, going to church, and then saying, what can I do as part of this institution to build community? Sometimes people think, oh, it just comes naturally. Well, I think it came easier in the past to build community, know your neighbors, et cetera. But it's always required inputs of hardworking individuals. And if you just wait for some central authority to make your community better, it's never going to happen. It takes leadership of actual people leveraging the power of institutions such as a local church congregation.
Yeah, I think it's like so many things. I was able to ride the coattails of the intentionality of the generations before me that built my town and built it thoughtfully and intentionally. And then we just happened to have grown up in it. And now the new towns that don't have that same intentionality, and we're like, well, what happened? Where did it all go? What are some political hurdles that have been put in the way too of family and of the nuclear family?
Well, so first of all, just the way that we're talking here, where we are prioritizing the nuclear family, that is in some people's minds of thinking sort of like discrimination, or the UK Prime Minister, when he was asked about the collapsing birth rates there as well as the rest of Europe and here, he did not want to talk about it. He said, I'm not going to dictate how people live their lives. Now, this is the UK where they don't have free speech, where, they locked everything down during COVID. So they dictate how people live lives. But talking about the idea that getting married and having kids and raising the kids together, that is, we know, I know, this is a fundamental, natural, good part of human life. But in the current age, that sounds preachy. That sounds old-fashioned. That sounds judgmental. And so that's one of the sort of political hurdles that gets in the way, is that we have to say, actually, no, this is what we think matters most, is the nuclear family. But the second one, though, is a tendency sometimes of conservatives to think the nuclear family doesn't need support. Because when Hillary said it takes a village to raise a child, she was probably talking about the Department of Health and Human Services. But conservatives know that what it really means is, the local parish, the local T-ball coach, a good library or something like that, that it really does actually take that support to actually raise kids. Parents can't do it on their own.
It's funny, there's two different sides here, right? So you have some parents who are too active, too helicopter, too engaged with kids. And then you have this side where it's like no engagement at all. And it's like, well, that's too far on the other side. So you got to find this nice middle ground. So I guess in the minute we have remaining here, let's speak maybe to the kids who are lazy, who don't work hard, who don't want to put effort in, who don't want to do anything but play video games, who don't want to build community, who don't want to go play pickup basketball. What do you do with that type of youngster?
Well, what our parents did is they kicked us out of the house, right? You can't play any more video games. You're out of the house, the door is locked, and hope that they naturally would, out of boredom, gravitate towards other things. And so trying to cure their boredom at every minute is probably a mistake. Let them be bored, and their creativity will have something. But yeah, organized sports are good. I mean, we're talking about the virtue of pickup. Organized sports are good in part because it makes the kids run around. It gives them something fun to do, and there's a coach, some other adult besides you, yelling at them to run their butt off. So I'm not going to badmouth organized sports, but you were right. The local organized sports is going to be a lot better than the travel ball, because the travel ball is just for the elite athletes. And if you're talking about these middling athletes, they should have a place to play. And, let's celebrate the kind of bad soccer players and give them a team to play on.
Tim Carney, he's the author of the book, Family Unfriendly. Go read it. How our culture made raising kids much harder than it needs to be, and fight against the forces that are fighting against you. Tim, good to talk to you, brother.
Thank you.